He was just the gardener. At least, that's what everyone thought. But by the end of this story, you'll see how one quiet man with dirt-stained hands and a gaze that never wavered turned a woman's world upside down, and made her question everything she thought she knew about love, loyalty, and herself. In today's story, we follow Amara, a woman born into privilege, returning to her family's estate after years away. She thought she was coming back to routine, to a life already mapped out for her. But waiting in the garden was something, or rather, someone, she never expected. A man who didn't belong to her world, but somehow, saw her more clearly than anyone else ever had. You'll see how a simple conversation between strangers can spark a connection that defies rules, expectations, and class. How silent moments can say more than words. And how sometimes, the person we're told to overlook is the very one who teaches us what it means to truly live. This isn't just a romance. It's a slow-burning unraveling of desire, inner conflict, and quiet rebellion. You'll learn how deep emotional connections can form in the most unlikely places, and why real love has the power to bloom, even in the shadows of tradition. So stay with us until the end to witness a journey that starts with silence and blossoms into something unforgettable. Welcome to the channel. If stories of love, emotion, and unexpected connections move you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join us for more deeply human tales like this one. Let's begin. Amara found herself visiting the garden more and more, a place she once avoided, now a sanctuary of sorts. The lush greenery, the sweet scent of flowers in bloom, and the hum of the wind through the trees had a calming effect on her, as if the garden was welcoming her back. But it wasn't just the garden that called her, it was Ravi. There was something about him that drew her in, an effortless confidence in his every movement as he worked. She had always dismissed the gardeners in the past, seeing them as just another part of the estate. But Ravi wasn't like the others. He didn't simply tend to the plants, he seemed to breathe life into them, coaxing each flower, each tree, to grow and thrive. He worked with an intensity and dedication that Amara hadn't expected from someone in his position. His hands, though rough and weathered from the work, moved with a quiet grace, as if he were orchestrating a masterpiece with each task. One afternoon, she found herself standing by the edge of the garden, watching him trim the edges of a row of roses. She hadn't meant to stay, but there was something almost magnetic about his presence. When he glanced up and caught her staring, she froze, unsure of what to say. Ravi didn't break eye contact, his gaze steady, but not unfriendly. He simply nodded, acknowledging her presence. It was a small gesture, but it felt significant. "Can I help you with something?" he asked, his voice calm but with an undertone of curiosity. For a moment, Amara didn't know how to respond. She had never been this close to a servant before, let alone one who made her feel something she couldn't quite define. She cleared her throat and tried to shake the odd tension in her chest. "No," she said softly, "I was just watching." She smiled, though it felt awkward. "I didn't know the garden could look like this. It's beautiful." Ravi's lips twitched, just the slightest hint of a smile. "It wasn't always like this," he said, returning to his task. "Takes time. Patience." There was a pause, and then he glanced at her again. "You've been away for a while, haven't you?" Amara nodded, surprised that he noticed. "Yes, just came back last week." "You should stay longer," he said, his words simple but carrying a weight that Amara couldn't quite place. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she watched as he continued to work, his movements deliberate, his focus intense. The silence between them was comfortable in a way that was both unfamiliar and strangely soothing. It was in that moment that she realized something. She felt seen, truly seen, for the first time in a long time. A sense of curiosity lingered within her. Who was this man? What made him so different from everyone else? Why did her heart race whenever he looked at her, even if it was just for a moment? With a quick glance at him, she turned and walked away, but not without a lingering sense of something unspoken between them. She couldn't shake the thought of Ravi, the quiet gardener, who had somehow stirred something deep inside her, a feeling she hadn't known she was missing until now. As she returned to the house, the weight of her family's expectations hung heavy on her shoulders. But for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel quite so sure of everything she thought she knew about herself or the life she was meant to lead. Something was changing, and it had everything to do with the gardener who seemed to have the power to make her question it all. Days turned into weeks, and Amara found herself spending more time in the garden. It wasn't just the beauty of the place that drew her back, but the pull she felt toward Ravi. Their conversations were few but meaningful, moments where words seemed almost unnecessary. She began to appreciate the quiet exchanges, how they communicated in subtle glances, the way their silences were never awkward but shared. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the garden, Amara made her way down the familiar path that led to the secluded part of the estate, the hidden corner where Ravi often worked. This area was tucked away from the rest of the grounds, a private little oasis that few people knew about. Amara had noticed Ravi's affinity for this space, his special care for the plants and flowers that grew here. It was as if this part of the garden was his secret. When she arrived, she found him kneeling on the ground, planting a row of delicate lavender. He didn't notice her right away, and she stood there for a moment, watching him work. The sunlight caught in his dark hair, and for a fleeting moment, she wondered how she had never really seen him before, how someone so grounded in their world could seem so otherworldly to her. "Do you always work here?" she asked, her voice soft, almost hesitant. Ravi looked up, surprised but not startled. His expression softened when he saw her, and he stood up slowly, wiping his hands on his worn jeans. "Not always," he replied, his voice warm and inviting. "Just when I need a little quiet." Amara took a step closer, drawn to the peace of the place but also to him. "It's beautiful here," she said, her eyes tracing the winding path of ivy-covered walls and flowering vines. "I didn't even know it existed." Ravi smiled, a genuine, quiet smile that made something stir deep inside her. "I like to keep it that way," he said. "Sometimes, things are better when they're hidden away. Protected." She couldn't help but wonder if he was talking about more than just the garden. "Do you ever think about sharing it with others?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He met her gaze, and for a moment, there was an intensity in his eyes that made her heart skip a beat. "Not really," he said, his voice low. "Some things are meant to be kept for yourself." The words hung between them, charged with an unspoken meaning. Amara felt a strange flutter in her chest as she realized the garden wasn't the only thing Ravi kept hidden. It was as if he had built walls around himself, invisible walls that kept people at a distance. And yet, she couldn't help but feel that he might let her in, if she only asked. But she didn't ask. Instead, they fell into another comfortable silence, the air thick with unspoken thoughts. Amara sat down on a nearby stone bench, and Ravi joined her, sitting just a little too far away to be called close, but close enough to feel the warmth of his presence. "You're different," Amara said suddenly, her voice breaking the stillness. "I can't really explain it, but you are." Ravi's gaze flickered to her, his expression unreadable. "How so?" She shrugged, feeling a little self-conscious. "You don't act like everyone else. Most people in my world, they're all concerned with what others think, with playing their part. But you don't seem to care about that." Ravi studied her for a moment before replying. "Maybe I've learned that what others think doesn't matter. What matters is what you think of yourself." Her heart pounded as his words resonated deep inside her. For the first time, she felt like she could breathe in a way she hadn't been able to before. Amara had spent so much of her life caring about the opinions of others, living by rules she never chose for herself. But sitting here with Ravi, she realized that maybe, just maybe, there was a way to break free from all of that. "I envy that," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wish I could feel that way." Ravi turned to face her fully now, his eyes soft, but serious. "You can. You just have to let go of the things that hold you back." For a moment, Amara was struck by how simple his words were, yet how deeply they cut through the facade she had spent years building. She had always been told what to do, who to be, but here, in this secret garden, with Ravi, she felt like she could be someone else, someone real. Their eyes locked for a moment longer, and Amara felt something shift. Something subtle, yet powerful. Ravi's quiet confidence had become a mirror, reflecting back to her everything she had been too afraid to see. She wasn't sure how much time passed before Ravi stood up and broke the silence. "I should get back to work," he said, his voice steady. Amara nodded, a little disappointed but understanding. She stood too, brushing off the slight unease that lingered. "Thank you for letting me see this place." He gave her another small, knowing smile. Maybe one day, you'll find a place of your own to hide away. Until then, you're always welcome here. With that, he turned and began walking back toward the rest of the garden, leaving Amara standing in the soft, golden light. She watched him go, a curious feeling settling in her chest. She wasn't sure where this connection was going, or even if it was real, but one thing was certain, she couldn't ignore the pull anymore. Something was growing between them, something fragile, but undeniable. And for the first time in a long time, she was willing to see where it would lead. The weeks that followed were a blur of quiet moments in the garden, stolen glances, and conversations that danced around the edges of something deeper. Amara found herself inexplicably drawn to Ravi, her thoughts often drifting to him when she least expected it. His presence lingered in her mind long after she had left the estate for the evening, a constant pull that she couldn't shake. But as the connection between them deepened, so did the tension. It wasn't just the secrecy of their bond or the unspoken feelings between them, it was the weight of the world they both inhabited. Amara's family, her friends, society at large, they all had expectations. The rules were clear: Ravi was the gardener, and she was the daughter of a wealthy family. The line between them was drawn in the sand, and neither of them could cross it without consequences. One evening, as Amara sat at the dinner table, the conversation took a turn she had been dreading. Her parents, noticing the subtle shift in her behavior over the past few weeks, exchanged glances before her mother cleared her throat. "Amara," her mother began, her voice too polite, "we've noticed you've been spending a lot of time in the gardens lately. Is everything all right?" Amara hesitated, unsure of how to respond. She had been careful not to give anything away, but she knew that it wouldn't be long before her family began to notice the way her eyes lingered on Ravi whenever he was near. Her mother's voice grew more insistent. "You know, darling, your father and I were speaking with the estate manager the other day. We've had some concerns about the staff, about boundaries. It's important that you don't get too involved with any of them. They have their place, and we have ours." Her father, who had been quiet until now, chimed in, his voice tinged with a firm authority. "Amara, we raised you with certain values. You're the heir to this estate. You mustn't let yourself get distracted by, well, people who don't belong to your world." The words stung, though Amara knew they were spoken with the kind of well-meaning ignorance that came from years of privilege. But she couldn't shake the anger that bubbled up inside her, the frustration of knowing that her family saw her as nothing more than a prize to be won or controlled. They couldn't possibly understand what she felt for Ravi, what he meant to her. How could they? The weight of their disapproval pressed down on her chest like a heavy stone. Her mother's disapproving gaze and her father's cold indifference made it clear that they would never accept her feelings for Ravi. Their words echoed in her mind long after the dinner ended, as she found herself retreating to her room, the familiar confines of the mansion feeling more suffocating than ever. But that night, as she lay in bed, she couldn't shake the thought of Ravi. The way his hands had touched the soil with such reverence, as if it were sacred. The way he had spoken to her, not with the calculated politeness of someone who knew their place, but with the honesty of someone who had nothing to lose. He had shown her a side of life she had never even considered. And now, she couldn't ignore it. The next day, Amara made her way to the garden, determined to see him again. She couldn't go on pretending that everything was fine, that her world could remain the same when her heart was pulled in a different direction. When she reached the garden, she found Ravi near the old oak tree, trimming the branches with care. He didn't look up when she approached, but she could see the shift in his posture, the way his body stiffened as if he knew she was there before she spoke. "Ravi," she said quietly, almost unsure of herself. "We need to talk." He paused but didn't turn around. "I know," he replied, his voice calm but thick with something else. "About us," she continued, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to stay composed. "I don't know what this is, but it's becoming impossible to ignore." Ravi finally looked up, his expression unreadable. There was a flicker of something in his eyes, surprise, maybe, or maybe something more. But he said nothing, waiting for her to continue. Amara swallowed, gathering her thoughts. "I can't keep pretending that nothing's happening. That I'm not feeling something. Every time I'm near you, it's like the world just stops, and I don't know what to do with that." Ravi's jaw tightened, and he took a step back, as if putting distance between them. "Amara, this isn't easy. You know the boundaries, the lines. That shouldn't be crossed. It's not just about you or me, it's about everything around us. Your family, my past. I can't let you risk everything for something that might not even last. Amara's heart clenched. She had known it wouldn't be easy, but hearing the words aloud made the reality of it all hit her like a punch in the gut. But what if it's worth it? She asked, her voice shaky but determined. What if we don't let those lines define us? What if we make our own choices? Ravi shook his head slowly, his eyes dark with conflict. You don't understand, Amara. It's not that simple. People like us, we don't get to have what we want. It's never that easy. But why not? She asked, stepping closer, her voice desperate now. Why do we have to follow the rules that everyone else set for us? Why can't we choose what makes us happy? Ravi looked at her for a long moment, his expression conflicted. Then, finally, he spoke, his voice low. Because I don't want to be the one to destroy you, Amara. I don't want to be the reason you lose everything. The words hit her harder than she expected. The raw honesty in his voice, the way he seemed to be protecting her from the very thing she wanted most, cut deep. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The weight of their emotions hung in the air, thick and unspoken, until finally, Ravi turned and walked away, leaving Amara standing there, her heart aching, uncertain of where the path ahead would lead. The distance between them felt more real now than ever before. But even as Ravi disappeared into the garden, Amara knew one thing for certain, she wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. Days passed in a haze for Amara. The silence between her and Ravi had grown deafening, like a wall that neither of them could break through. Each time she ventured into the garden, she could feel the distance between them, an unspoken divide that neither of them had the courage to cross. The weight of her family's expectations, the disapproval that hung over them both, had become almost too much to bear. But despite everything, her heart refused to let go. She tried to focus on other things, her daily routine, the obligations her family had set for her, but none of it felt real anymore. All her energy seemed to drain away when she wasn't near him. It was like she had become a part of a world she no longer fit into, and the only place where she could breathe was in the garden, with him. Then, one afternoon, she found herself back there again, her steps almost automatic, as though her body knew what her heart refused to admit. She didn't even plan on seeing Ravi, but the moment she stepped into the garden, she spotted him. He was bent over near the flower beds, his back to her, lost in his work. A knot tightened in her chest. It had been days since they'd spoken, and every inch of her ached to bridge the gap. She hesitated at first, unsure if she should just turn around and leave. But something inside her, some unrelenting force, pushed her forward. Ravi, she called softly, her voice uncertain but steady. She took a step closer. He didn't turn at first, but she saw his shoulders tense slightly, as if he knew it was her. Slowly, he stood up and wiped his hands on his pants, then turned to face her. His face was unreadable, and the familiar warmth in his eyes seemed muted, guarded. I didn't expect to see you today, he said, his tone flat, though there was a faint trace of something else, something he wasn't saying. I couldn't stay away, Amara admitted, her voice quiet but firm. She stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat of his body, but still just far enough away that the distance between them felt tangible. Ravi looked at her for a long moment, as if weighing his next words carefully. Amara, you don't understand. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, and I understand more than you think, she interrupted, her eyes locking onto his. I know the risks, Ravi. I know how complicated this is. But I also know that this, she gestured between them, the connection they had, the bond that felt impossible to ignore, this is real. And I'm not willing to just let it go. Ravi's jaw tightened. His eyes flickered away from hers, as if he couldn't bear to look at her too closely. You think you know, but you don't, he said, his voice tight with emotion. You don't know what it's like to live in my world, to have nothing, to be nothing. You don't know what it's like to feel like you'll never belong, no matter how hard you try. I can't offer you anything, Amara. Nothing that's worth the pain it will cause. Her heart squeezed in her chest, a sharp pain that threatened to overwhelm her. She stepped forward, closing the distance between them, her voice soft but unwavering. I don't need you to offer me anything, Ravi. I don't need anything but the chance to be with you. To be real. For the first time in my life, I'm not worried about what other people think. I'm not worried about the expectations or the rules. I just want us to be honest with each other. He shook his head, his eyes dark and filled with conflict. You don't know what you're asking for, he murmured, almost as if to himself. You don't know how much it could hurt. How much it could destroy. Amara reached out, her hand trembling slightly, but she didn't pull it back. She placed it gently on his arm, feeling the warmth of his skin beneath her fingers. I'm willing to take that risk, Ravi. I need you to believe that I can handle it. That we can handle it together. For a long moment, he said nothing, his gaze flickering between her eyes and the ground beneath them. The tension in the air was thick, the unspoken words hanging between them like a storm waiting to break. Then, without warning, he reached out and took her hand in his grip gentle but firm. Amara's breath caught in her throat as their eyes met again, and for the first time in what felt like forever, there was something like hope in his expression, something raw and unguarded. I don't know if I can be what you want, he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. But I'm willing to try. Her heart swelled at his words, and she took a step closer, closing the final gap between them. For the first time, their distance seemed to disappear entirely. The world around them faded, leaving only the two of them standing there, a fragile, yet undeniable connection sparking in the space between their hands. I don't need you to be anything but yourself, Amara said softly, her voice filled with emotion. That's enough for me. And then, for the first time in weeks, they stood there, silently, but no longer distant. No longer worlds apart. The tension had shifted, and in its place was something more powerful, more real. Something that neither of them could ignore any longer. As they stood together, hand in hand, the weight of their worlds, the expectations, the rules, everything that had kept them apart, seemed to fade into the background. In that moment, nothing else mattered but the space they shared, the quiet understanding between them, and the promise that, whatever came next, they would face it together. The days that followed were filled with a quiet, tentative sense of hope, yet the tension was never far from the surface. Though Amara and Ravi had found something real between them, the world outside their small bubble of connection was relentless. The estate, her family, the social circles she had once been a part of, they all loomed over them, casting long shadows that threatened to swallow up whatever they had begun to build. Amara knew the risks. She knew the expectations her family had for her and the way they would react if they ever found out about her feelings for Ravi. But with every passing day, her resolve only grew stronger. She couldn't keep pretending. She couldn't let the weight of her family's legacy crush her own desires. And neither could Ravi. The world they had created together, even if fragile, was worth fighting for. One afternoon, as Amara walked through the garden with Ravi, she noticed how the once vibrant blooms had started to wither. The bright colors of the flowers that Ravi had nurtured so carefully were fading, their petals drooping under the harshness of the summer sun. It mirrored her own feelings, something beautiful, yet fragile, slowly being consumed by the harsh realities of the world around them. Ravi was quiet as he worked, his movements slow and deliberate, as though he could somehow will the flowers to thrive again with just his touch. Amara stood beside him, unsure of how to break the silence that had fallen between them. Ravi, she said finally, her voice barely a whisper, are we going to keep pretending that this is okay? That we can keep doing this, living like this, in secret? Because I'm not sure how much longer I can. He paused, the pruning shears still in his hand, and turned to face her. His eyes were filled with a mixture of regret and concern. I don't want to hide anymore, Amara. But you have to understand, it's not just about us. It's about everything else, the people who depend on us, the lives we've built. It's not as simple as just walking away. Amara nodded, swallowing hard. I know how complicated this is. But I don't want to lose you, Ravi. Not because of them, not because of their rules. He took a deep breath, and for the first time, she saw something break in his expression. It wasn't just the gardener anymore. It wasn't just the man who had always known his place at the bottom of the ladder. He was someone who had dreams, who had desires. And he was willing to risk it all, just as she was. I don't want to lose you either, he admitted softly, his voice thick with emotion. But I can't promise you that it will be easy. We will lose so much along the way. We'll be the ones left behind, forgotten by everyone who ever mattered to us. You're the daughter of this estate, Amara. You can't just walk away from all of that. Amara's heart ached at his words. He was right. She had everything to lose. A future filled with luxury, status, and security, everything her family had worked for, everything that had been set out for her since birth. But none of it had ever felt real. Not until Ravi. And she knew, deep down, that she couldn't go on pretending it didn't matter. I don't care about any of that anymore, she said firmly, her voice shaking with the weight of her decision. I care about you. And I don't want to lose us. For a long moment, Ravi said nothing. Then, slowly, he reached out and took her hand in his. His touch was warm, reassuring, but it carried the weight of everything they were about to face. We'll do this together, Amara. Whatever happens, we face it together. But know that it won't be easy. We will have to fight for this. For us. Amara nodded, her heart swelling with a mixture of fear and hope. She wasn't naive. She knew the road ahead would be filled with obstacles, the kind that could tear them apart if they weren't careful. But for the first time, she felt a spark of certainty within her. No matter what came next, no matter the consequences, they would face it as equals. No longer separated by their worlds, but standing side by side, ready to challenge everything that had kept them apart. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the garden was bathed in soft, golden light, Amara and Ravi sat together under the shade of the oak tree. The air was thick with the scent of flowers, the sounds of the evening birds chirping softly in the background. It was peaceful. But beneath the calm, there was an undercurrent of tension, a quiet promise that they were both about to step into uncharted territory. Amara, Ravi said quietly, his hand still holding hers, I know it won't be easy. But I want to try. I want to make this work, no matter what. Amara's heart fluttered at his words. We'll make it work, she whispered back, squeezing his hand tighter. Together. And as they sat there, the fading light casting shadows around them, they both understood that the hardest part wasn't over yet. But for the first time in a long time, they were ready to face it together. Ready to take on whatever the world threw their way. Because love, after all, was never meant to be easy. It was meant to be fought for. And this was their fight. Their choice. And they would never let go. As Amara and Ravi stood together, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, their story became a testament to the power of love and the courage it takes to break free from the expectations that bind us. No matter the obstacles, no matter the risks, they had found something worth fighting for, a love that defied the world they knew and created a new path, together. This story of forbidden love, of breaking barriers and choosing each other, resonates with anyone who has ever faced a difficult decision for the sake of love. It reminds us that, sometimes, the greatest rewards come from stepping out of our comfort zones and daring to live life on our own terms. If you found Amara and Ravi's journey as inspiring as we did, don't forget to hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear this story. Love is worth fighting for, and it's a story worth telling. If you haven't already, subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt stories like this one. Join us on this journey of love, passion, and the power to overcome anything that comes your way. Until next time, stay inspired and never give up on love.